black man after 4 years.
Good morning. I think it's time for us to start the event. Everyone, please take your seat and we'll get going. So I want to welcome and thank you all for being here. This is on behalf of the Wisconsin ADRC and UW Madison. And as you all know, this is the first time after 3 years that we are meeting in person. So thank you for being here. And what a beautiful day to meet, right? And we have organized a very exciting and a productive program for you. But again, thank you for being here. And I want to convey a special thank you to the Solomon Carter Fuller Organizing Committee and also the Alzheimer's and Dementia Alliance. With their partnership, this event was possible really with their partnership. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge the presence of some people from Oneida. We have today Sachin Lawrence and Margaret King. Are you both here? Thank you for what you do for us. So as you know, we are here together to celebrate the contributions and life of Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller. And as you know, he was a German psychiatrist who conducted breakthrough research and pioneering research in Alzheimer's disease. He was born in Liberia, and he was the grandson of a Virginia slave. And he came to the United States in 1889, I believe, and went to medical school at Boston University and graduated from there. And in 1904, he was one of only 5 physicians who were selected to go to Germany to work with Dr. Alzheimer's. And he learned so much, as you can imagine, from Dr. Alzheimer's. And then he came back to the United States, brought his expertise and all the work that he had done, and continued his work in the United States and made seminal contributions to understanding what Alzheimer's is. So we are here to celebrate the life and contributions of a great person and an outstanding physician scientist. So I think the next on our agenda is Reverend Dr. Alexander G. Dr. G is here to make his comments. You know Dr. G very well. Thank you, Dr. G.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you here today, particularly on behalf of the Black Leaders Brain Health Committee. My task is to talk just briefly about that, offer a word of prayer over our food, and then introduce our musical guests today. The Black Leaders Brain Health really grew out of a discussion at a dinner party with Dr. Carey Gleason. We're talking about Alzheimer's, its impact on the Black community. I was updating her a little bit about my mother's diagnosis and how our family was responding to all of this. And she asked what my vision was, what I would love to see the community do. And I said, there are so many communities, there's so many committees that are made up of people of color, particularly Black people in our community, where we're basically figureheads and people come and share information with us and say, now we've reached out to the Black community. I said, I want to see something that allows us to impact the science. I want us to get feedback. I want us to hear what's going on. We can do more than disseminate information. We can help you to actually verify your data, to think about the information that you've gathered, and to help to interpret what some of the participants may have meant in their responses. And that led to the formation of this committee, where along with Brenda Lofton, we are the founding co-chairs, and we meet quarterly to do a number of things. But let me just first remind you, or just let you know what our mission is. It's to gather key and prominent leaders from Madison's Black community to guide the Wisconsin ADRC in their efforts to improve inclusive, just, and ethical research and historically marginalized communities. A number of things that we do, we attend quarterly meetings, and that's been very trying during COVID. But I have to just say, Dr. Fabu Carter, Ms. Tracy Smith, and of course, Dr. Gleason, take care of their committees. We have food, I don't know if I should say this or not, but we have food delivered to our homes where we meet. We turn off our screens when we get to the bottom of the greens because we want to make sure we get that last, little corner. But great food, great gathering, and great thoughtfulness. Before I go any further, I would just like to ask all the members of the Black Leaders Brain Health Committee, would you please stand so that I can help to recognize you and thank you for your participation? Please help me give them a... We have people all across the spectrum. Of course, one of our resident researchers, Dr. Gooding, keeps us on point, makes sure that our research is very stellar, and she does not suffer fools lightly. And so she keeps us on point. But it's just really a tremendous team. As you might imagine, as a community influencer, there are a number of committees I'm asked to sit on. And this committee, and I say this in all honesty, is my favorite because of the commitment, because of the percentage of attendance, because of the food, because of the soul food that is delivered to my house. The thoughtful agendas, the planning for the agendas is just tremendous. And Dr. Fabu and Ms. Tracy, can I just have you two just stand? You all do a great job of staffing. Tracy Smith and Fabu Carter, we really do appreciate you. We would not be able to do this without you all. You keep the agenda moving ahead. And the last thing I'll say is I appreciate Dr. Carey Gleason and Dr. Sanjay and the support that they give the committee. When things don't seem right, for example, when there are new drugs that are introduced and there continues to be federal funding, whether it's through NIH or NSF, and there are not enough Black participants, and we're upset about that because that means when these drugs are introduced, we don't know how they work on Black people. Dr. Carey Gleason has helped to open doors so that I can offer a testimony at a national level to a governing body that oversees the funding of these federal institutions to challenge them. And it actually gave me an opportunity to say, I understand why my mother forgets, but I don't understand why y'all continue to forget that Black people are not in your studies and you keep funding them, although this is illegal, by an order put forth by President Obama. And so I love the fact that we don't have to play the role of the nice black people hearing nice information and taking it back to our constituents. We get to push agendas back uphill, and it makes us feel that we are having an impact on the science. And so I want to let you all know that we appreciate the voice that you make room for, and that this isn't just cosmetic, but you give us room and space to really be advocates for the black community where Alzheimer's and dementia disease is running rampant. And I want to appreciate you all for that leadership. Thank you. So you're in for a wonderful treat today, wonderful food, wonderful entertainment, and also a wonderful speaker. And so I want to thank you for spending your beautiful Saturday with us. It would be very difficult if this were a snowy, rainy, a typical April Saturday, but we have a very atypical April Saturday morning. But still, you are here because this is important. This is affecting us in ways that we would not have believed. It is a very expensive disease, and so many of the things that have become indicators of it are diseases that are prevalent already in the black community. So we have lots and lots and lots of work to do, and it begins with gatherings like this. So please know that your presence, your affirmation, and your support helps us to continue doing this work. And we have an excellent center here. You know, as I think there are about 30 of these centers around the country, and I once asked, like, so where do we rank, like, if it were a scale of 1 to 10 among the 30, like at Wisconsin, the ARDC center here, I'm like, are we 9, are we 10? And I won't tell you who told me, but I was told we're like number 16 on a scale of 1 to 10. And so that means we're good. And we're going to have an influence in how this disease is thought about and treated around the country and around the world. Let me offer a word of thanks for the food and introduce our special musical guest. Lord, for this food and for this day, for this opportunity, for the lives that will be touched, for the brains that will be spared, for the families who will be comforted, for the research that will be established, for the knowledge that will be shared, and for the hope that will be experienced, we're grateful. For every life, for every story, for every person who is struggling, for every person who will struggle with this ugly disease, would you please offer us grace and strength to love and to lean in and to do better. Bless the food that we're going to receive, strengthen us as we take it, and encourage us to have helpful and healthy and fruitful conversations around the table. Bless our speaker and those that are addressing us and our musical guest, that we will leave this place really feeling like it has added a benefit to our lives and it has really added to us. We are grateful for this day and for this space and for our life and for our health and for our loved ones, particularly those who are suffering from this ugly disease. We are grateful for the services that they're already receiving. So bless this day and bless this food. Amen. I'd like to introduce two main staples in our community, and not just the black community, but the broader Madison community for decades. They have been singing and encouraging and inspiring in churches, out of churches, to dignitaries as they come to our communities. I want to introduce Mrs. Mary Henderson and Leotha Stanley. Mrs. Mary Henderson is a gifted soloist who has blessed the community through song, as I mentioned, for decades. When you hear her sing, her voice reminds us of the wonder of the African American culture and heritage. And every beautiful voice we have ever heard. There's a strong, in our community, in our faith community, it's called an anointing, which means a very divine touch, a very special touch from God that she possesses. That Mr. Leotha Stanley will be accompanying Mrs. Henderson on the keyboards. Mr. Stanley is a very well-known and accomplished musician who is well-known throughout Madison, the state of Wisconsin, school districts, and the country. Please help me put our hands together for them as they come at this time. Thank you.
Rolling sea.
taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Oh, you can be seated on this song as I sing it when I get down there, you know, call and respond. So you can just sing along with me once I get into it. And thinking of this, yesterday, Dr. Fabu, when he was in here testing, there was another version of a song that I did, and she said, I really would appreciate it, you know, if you did it, but I'm just going to do a line of it before I do how I got over. Just an invitation of letting us know what we need to do to get where we need to be, and that is press, press your way on through. Okay. Press your way through, press your way through. Can't give up now, you gotta press your way through, press my way through, press my way through. God has something waiting, but I must press my way through, press my way through. My way through, oh, press my way through, press on through. I know God has something waiting, and I gotta press my way through. You know my soul, look back and wonder, Lord, how did I make it over? Oh, how I got over, my Lord. How did I make it over, my Lord? You know my soul, look back and wonder, how did I make it over? My Lord, oh, made it on over. Well, you know my soul, look back and wonder how I made it over. Soon as I can see Jesus, the man that died for me. Thank him how he taught me. I gotta thank him 'cause he kept me. Oh, thank him 'cause he never left me. Oh, I'm gonna sing never left me. I want to thank God for the old time religion. I want to thank Him for giving me a vision. I'm going to join a heavenly choir. We're going to sing and never get tired. No, we're going to shout, woo, hallelujah. Oh, sing my troubles over. Oh, my soul, look back and wonder, how did we make it over? I'm gonna wear flying garment in that new Jerusalem. Gonna walk the streets of gold in the homeland of the soul. Gonna view that host in white that's been traveling both day and night, coming up from every nation on their way to a great coronation. We're gonna meet somewhere round the altar and shout, troubles over. Oh, my soul, look back and wonder, how did I make it over? Oh, yeah, I'm gonna thank God how He brought me. I gotta thank God how He kept me. I gotta thank Him for watching over me all night. And know He touched me early this morning, and I was able to see a brand new day. I gotta thank God for how He kept me. I gotta thank God for keeping me, Lord. Oh, I'm gonna sing hallelujah. I'm gonna shout my troubles over. I'm gonna thank God, thank Him for being so good to me.
Mrs. Mary Henderson.
Let's give her another hand clap. Mrs. Mary Henderson and our own Yelta Stanley. We thank them because that's not just entertainment. It takes us right back to our roots and to our foundation and to, in her voice I hear so many voices. So we are so grateful for them.
Hello everyone, my name is Mohammed. I'm one of the outreach assistants here at the ADRC. I'm also a student at UW-Madison. I'll be graduating in a month or two. I'll be applying to medical school soon, so very exciting times. We want to thank you guys all again for being here. It's a very special event, and we're especially excited about today's event because we have some young people part of the event. First up is Isan Morales. He'll be playing Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller. Please make sure to pay close attention to his performance because he's going to be going around later asking you some questions, and that'll help you join the raffle. We have a lot of good prizes, so you don't want to miss out on that. So everyone help me give a warm welcome to Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller.
Thank you all so much. So, as you're probably wondering, since I was born in 1872, you're probably wondering since I was born in 1872 why I look so young. So, I told someone earlier, Manuka honey does the trick. So, anyway, some interesting facts about my life. As you all know, that I am the author of The Pre-Senile Dementia, which I wrote in 1912 after my tutelage under Emil Kraepelin in Germany. It was actually one of my crowning jewels going to Germany. And I honestly can say that the research and the expertise in Germany at that time was far more advanced than that of America. So as you all know, I received my Professor Emeritus from Boston University, which renewed yearly for the rest of my life. I also grew up as a child of privilege in Monrovia, Liberia, and I was actually the first African to attend Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina. You probably don't notice by looking at me, but I only managed the football team. I did not play on it. I also wrote the college song for Livingstone College, and I chose the college colors, which the school later adopted. They also presented me with an honorary graduate 40 years later after my passing. But I came back to life, obviously. Some more interesting things about me is that I actually love the Latin language. By the age of 10, while some of you guys are reading Teletubby books and watching Mr. Rogers, I was actually reading Julius Caesar in Latin, in its original text. When I would get bored in school because I was intellectually advanced, I actually would get punished by being told to read Latin. Well, it was easy for me because I knew Latin already. My mother actually trained me in education at a very early age. I started school at the age of 5 years old. So, I actually ended up going to the sub-freshman class of Monrovia College at the age of 16. And so, yeah, I had a pretty advanced, intelligent life as a student. One of the, people talk about me as the first black psychiatrist in America, but that really wasn't my claim to fame. It was my contributions to mental health, the fellow service of my fellow man and woman, and just to see what people have done in my honor. Those are the crowning jewels of my life. In Framingham, the area where I bought me and my beautiful wife, Meta Vox Warwick, who was a renowned sculptor and painter, there's also a school named after me, the Dr. Solomon Carter School. And I also have a mental health facility honored in my name in Boston. You guys are probably like, how did you pay for all these colleges? Well, when I went to Boston University, they wanted me to go back to be a medical missionary, but I told them no. I ended up working as an elevator operator on Commonwealth for $4 per week. That's how I paid my way through Boston University. When I was at Livingstone College, I did receive help from my wealthy family in Monrovia. We owned our own plantation, so yay us, right? But honestly, the true crowning joys of my life, I had 3 beautiful sons. One was one of the first black investors at Merrill Lynch who worked on the Boston Stock Exchange. And yeah, I look around today and I see all the contributions to Alzheimer's, and I remember my long hours in the lab with Emil Kraepelin and Dr. Alzheimer. And I see the beautiful faces and the beautiful contributions you all have made, and I thank you. And thank you for doing this in my honor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Solomon Carter Filler. Very nice to see you looking healthy. So it's been a long time, man. We also have with us today the Ghana Association of Madison, and we want to give them a special thank you, especially for giving Dr. Karikari a nice welcome yesterday. They had a nice dinner last night, so we want to give you guys a special welcome. And as I said earlier, we do have some young people who will be performing, so we're very excited about that. First up, we have Fanuel Hammond, who will be performing the Ghanaian national anthem, so please give him a warm welcome.
Shall we please stand for the national anthem of the Republic of Ghana? Give me the key. God bless our homeland and make our nation great and strong, bold to defend forever the cause of freedom and pride. Fill our hearts with true humility, make make us cherish fearless honesty.
Wow, really good job. One more round of applause for Mr. Hammond. Up next, we have another talented young woman. Her name is Addison Ado. Please help me give her a warm welcome up to the stage. So much talent on the stage. I want to give another round of applause for her. That was wonderful. Sorry about that. Up next, we have Dr. Carey Gleason, who is an associate professor here at UW-Madison. Give her a warm welcome.
Thanks, Mohammed. Is this okay if well, actually, I'll see. Yeah, this will work. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I echo the thanks of sharing your beautiful Saturday with us today. I know there's lots of competition for stuff out there to go to, and it's a real honor to welcome everyone here today. I have the great pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Karikari, but before I do that, I have a lot of people to thank, if I could just take a moment for that. Thank you to the Ghana Association for feeding Dr. Karikari and giving him such a warm welcome to Madison. It's a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate people going out of their way for that. I want to thank our founding mothers for the Solomon Carter Fuller event, Ms. Charlie Daniel and Dr. Dorothy Edwards. And also our partners in this work. So the Alzheimer's and Dementia Alliance of Wisconsin has been a partner in this event from the beginning. And as part of their team, they had the Solomon Carter Fuller Advisory Committee. And it's gone through a couple different iterations over the years, but our most recent iteration, Dr. Bobby Moore and Teresa Sanders and Barbara McKinney were our partners in making this event what it is. So I really appreciate their leadership in providing guidance for the Solomon Carter Fuller event. Yes. And I want their vision, our founding mothers and the Solomon Carter Fuller Planning Committee, it was their vision that really made this event possible. And as being someone who was there from the beginning helping to execute that vision, I don't want to forget to thank the people who are behind the scenes in this work. So there's so many names, but I want to highlight a few. So Mr. James Bester, thank you for your work. Always behind the scenes and quiet, so I know you're there. Miss LaTanya Floyd and her sunny disposition, so. Miss Tiara Smith, who again is one of these quiet but amazing partners in this work. And Miss Anique Dupati, one of our newest members. So be careful what you mention around Anique, because she'll remember and she'll like do that one incredibly thoughtful thing that you're like, wow. So welcome and to the team, Anique, and thanks for your hard work on this. And I cannot forget, there's so many other volunteers who are here for the day volunteering. I love that Amy Lambert Murphy roped her husband into working here. So thank you for that. I also want to thank, I can't thank enough, or I can't highlight this enough, that Dr. Fabu Carter, she's amazingly sitting down, so you rarely see her sitting down at these events. All these little touches that you see, like just look around and like all the little small things that you see that are like the extra little things at the table, that's her. So her mission in life is to make you feel welcome, and I think she goes over and above, and it always brings her best work. So I really, again, thank you, Dr. Carter, for your partnership and all your great work. So with that, I'd like to now move to our welcome to Dr. Karikari. Of course, I want to highlight his many accomplishments. Dr. Karikari is incredibly talented, multi-talented, and the people in academia will appreciate that. He's an assistant professor, and he directs at least like 3 to 4 different programs at University of Pittsburgh. He's a director as an assistant professor. So that tells you how accomplished he is. He obtained a degree in biochemistry in Ghana, and then he moved to the UK, where he had obtained degrees in pharmaceutical biotech and clinical chemistry. Like, imagine putting those two together. And then he did 2 postdocs, 2 back-to-back postdocs, first in neurology at Harvard, and then in clinical neurochemistry at the University of Gothenburg. And so Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller mentioned that some of the greatest work was coming out of Germany around the time that Dr. Alzheimer's was working. Some of the greatest work in the detection of the disease is coming out of Gothenburg. So Dr. Karikari being in Gothenburg, he's at the heart of it, and the fact that they were able to recruit him there shows you how incredibly talented and how people think of him worldwide. He's one of the most sought-after speakers. So if you look at his CV, he's had almost a dozen international talks in less than a 2-year period. So here he is in Madison. I'm so honored, so thank you. He's doing Nobel laureate worthy work. He won't tell you this, but he's involved in leading the field in the detection for blood-based biomarkers. So you talk about, how do we know we have Alzheimer's disease? If you could do a blood test, wouldn't that be a game changer? Yeah. So Dr. Karikari is the guy to talk to about this. He is a foremost expert in this area. And he's developed some novel assays, so he's making his own unique contribution to the field in this. So he'll tell you, I'm sure, about those assays, but it's really exciting work. And again, it's going to be a game changer. The other thing, though, I admire about him is that he cares about inclusive research. There's many people who are working in this area, and it's just really about their career. Dr. Karikari is making sure that this work is going to help all people, and it's going to be something that's feasible. So let's get these tests out of these high-tech laboratories and move them into community. So he and I first connected on his shared interest in inclusive research, and I'm honored to say that it looks like he's wants to include the AA-FAIM cohort in some of this groundbreaking science. So I'm really excited about that. But I can't just talk about your academic achievements, Tommy. So I will tell you a little bit about some things I've learned about Dr. Karikari recently. He's the youngest of 9 kids. So we were commiserating about what it's like to be the youngest of these big families. You're always the little one, you know, you're always but his success in science, I think, comes honestly by who he is as a person. He told a story about how he probably drove his mom crazy with this one because he doesn't like Ghanaian food. Yeah, so tell that to a Ghanaian mother, I'm sure it goes over really well. So good luck trying to get him to eat Ghanaian food, right, as a young man. But that's, you know, for those of you who are parents, right, that quality in your kid that drives you crazy is probably one of the best things for them as they move into life, right? So he has a persistence and a clarity in terms of what he wants to accomplish, and all he needs is a challenge. So he told a story about, someone told him that you can't measure that brain protein in the blood. So he said, that's all I needed. And there it goes, okay? So that quality that has probably drove your mom crazy, Dr. Karikari, I'm so grateful that you bring it to science, and I'm so grateful you bring it to inclusive research. So with that, I would love everyone to join me in welcoming Dr. Karikari and to hear about his exciting science.
It's, you know, I must say I have never seen a room with loads of black people like this ever since I left Ghana. This never happened. And at least it tells us one thing, that we are moving in the right direction. And the people who really make this happen is you. Because without you, people can sit in the boardrooms and say, we need to include people, we need to expand, we need to include all walks of, people from all walks of life. But it's one thing saying, and it's another thing making all these people come together. We need to be able to connect with everyone. It's such a great honor to be here. And yeah, all the things Carey said, well, I don't think some of them are true. Because she raises me so high. But what really matters is we are here, right? And we're doing what matters, and we're doing what we like, and we're doing what helps. That is the only thing that drives all of us. So when Fanuel was singing the Ghana anthem, there was a line that connected with me. It says, let's cherish fearless honesty. And that fearless honesty is what really drives all we do. That let's do it. Let's make sure that should a time come, should I be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, should anyone who looks like me be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they will not be treated differently. They will be given the same level of care and treatment that everyone should have. So it took a while to come up with the topic. So what I thought to say, that we're talking about blood tests, and they're really exciting. But how can they improve the care and the treatment for everyone? It's for all. No, we don't want to leave anyone behind. And how are we going to do that? So I'll start a little bit, just as Carey said, just to connect a little bit with who I am. Started from Ghana. If you feel like in a global context, it's a small country. And this was me. with my parents. I think I was less than 10 years. It was a Christmas time. And I have a 6-year-old. When he wants to get cheeky, this is what he uses. He says, when my dad was young, he had a photo with his parents and he went like this. And with what Carey said, I think that really was the aspect. So I love Ghana food. There were just some staples, like, with Ghanaians would say fufu, right? We have the fufu, the staple fufu, and that was like the darling food of my household. And then this tiny boy comes along, and I was so young, I was like about 2 years, and because we had a massive house. And I had a little stool. I used to sit there and see everyone what is going on, asking myself questions and connecting. And then I was like, why does it take so much to make this food? The effort that goes into it, I had to see my brothers pounding it. No, I'm not going to eat that food. And it was just because, there should be easier ways to eat, right? And then when the time came, so it wasn't time for me to be fed it. So when the time came for me to be fed it, I was like, no. And I had a big trouble with my mom. So that's the face I make. But I guess that's one aspect that, tells that if we really want to move on, there are aspects that we have to do. Of course, as Carey said, the training and everything I've done has, taken me to different parts of the world, across 3 continents. But one thing that I think also runs across is, what is the final value? So I put ellipses there because where are we going? What we've been through is nice, or is good to remember, but where are we going? That's what matters most. So let's talk about Alzheimer's, or let's talk about dementias. I know we have a lot of discussions. We know that a significant number of older adults get to develop these diseases. We don't know, in terms of the dementias, too much about them. I don't like to compare diseases because it's not a race, but sometimes we say, the cancers are going down, but the dementias are increasing, and now what should we do, and what can we do to reduce these effects, right? That they say in the United States, there's more than 6 million people who are affected, and these numbers are expected to keep going. Well, we don't want to be just statistics. We want to be able to bring things down that all of us can connect along those levels. And it was really nice to have this event named after Dr. Carter Fuller, because it's just amazing to actually think of and get to know that when it came to the discovery or the beginning of the disease, we were there. There was someone who had our interest, who was part of the whole aspect. So I had to revise this slide. Oftentimes we put Dr. Alzheimer as the guy who discovered the disease, of course. But as we know, no one does everything by themselves. It takes a room full of people. So it's great that we know that. Because we know that when Dr. Carter was working with Alzheimer's, he get to the point of identify, Dr. Alzheimer get to identify that the first patient who is on record to have been diagnosed that they had Alzheimer's was Augusta Dieter. And this was many, many years ago. I'm not sure where I was ever. But there's one aspect that with a disease, in terms of the clinical aspect, there are the stages that people go through, that we get to know that we have what we call a preclinical stage, where people can have the changes in their brain, but not showing up with symptoms. So for example, you could see it this way. So when someone who's had Alzheimer's and has died goes to pathology, they take the tissue, they slice it up, and then the pathologist will do some staining to identify some of the key biological changes that define the disease. Oftentimes, they look out for plaques, so these buildups, those in red, for example, that are made up of amyloid peptides, and then you can also see tangles that are made up of tau proteins. Now, from the autopsy, which is the neuropathology, now we know that during life, because we don't want to wait for everyone to go to autopsy, we can see these things. If we can see them before life, then that's when we can actually start with intervention. Then we have this brain imaging, where they're doing really great at UW Madison. And then we have CSF biomarkers, where they take spinal tap, right? And then you can also have blood markers that we think are going to be the next big thing now. And we have people going across all these stages. So for example, if we start from here, people who have no clinical changes, they also start showing MCI, so mild cognitive impairment. There was a desk about mild cognitive impairment, which is nice because this stage, it's more like the tipping point from this in terms of it comes to symptoms. And with all the new drugs that have been tried, they try to target people in that stage because it looks like that is a good point that you could really start with any intervention and then be able to target it. You don't want to wait until people have gone all the way before you try to bring them back. Now, why are these biomarkers important? That we talk about blood markers, we talk about these aspects, why are they important? Well, we get to think that there are changes that do happen. So all these colors are referring to different biological changes that do happen in the brain. That I talked about all these markers, initially the amyloid, the tau, and then all the neurodegeneration, which is like, the brain shrinkage that could occur. Now, we think that all those ones occur before we get to see symptoms. Now, of course, it's not everyone who show it that way, but on a group level, we get to see these biological changes happening before individuals start showing cognitive changes. So it means that if we want to initiate anything, it's great if we start here. And how can we do that? We can't do that if we don't know what is in one's brain or what is someone's biological profile. And that is why we need these tests, we need these markers to be able to help all of us. Yeah, these are the changes that, like the amyloid, the tau, with all those colors represent. Now, several years ago, this biological criteria that I'm sure you've heard about multiple times. Talk about the amyloid beta, because I talked about the amyloid beta you see in the brain, and then you can also measure with CSF and all. Now, if you go through this PET imaging, then you get to have this A beta because measured. So those who do not have a lot of A beta in their brain, they have this color is much lower, and then here you get to have a much deeper spectrum. So then it gives an idea that someone is likely having the amyloid in their brain. Another way to do it is to take a spinal tap, and that spinal tap would be able to measure these biological changes that we think start from the brain, and some of them, tiny bits of those, leak out into the cerebrospinal fluid, so the spine. And if we put a needle through there and take out some of the spinal, do a spinal tap, take out some of the fluid, you can measure these changes. Of course, when these times come, they were very groundbreaking. And I take pride sometimes in that these discoveries were made, actually, when it comes to the CSF aspect, by my mentor, who is in Sweden, that I'm training with. So he's very shy sometimes, so I try to embarrass him sometimes that, this is what you did. And then many years later, where we thought we couldn't do it in blood, we brought it to blood. So it's like there's this pattern that's occurring. Now we have the tau pathology also. Similarly, you can do with imaging, you can do with CSF, right? And and then you get to have neurodegeneration. It's a long word, it's a big word, but basically so things that are just changing in a way that if you do MRI, for example, you get to see people are having shrinkages in the brain in some of the areas that can be indicative of Alzheimer's. Or you can measure some of other proteins also in CSF to give you an idea. Now, what we have here is that now these are the approved ways to do it. Either you get to have imaging done, or you get to have CSF done. That is all good, but there's one aspect, which is that they're coming expensive. The throughput is not the best because you need to schedule people, you need to arrange. So imagine that if we said that, let's screen everyone who is over 60 years or over 65 years for likelihood of having these protein changes that are indicative of Alzheimer's in their brain. Even if we have all the cyclotrons or all the instruments that are required, and the PET, the MRI that are required to do this, we can't contain. Even the people in Madison alone, we can't contain. So we need things that are quicker and easier, and they are also less expensive. And that's how we come in. So now we talk about blood tests, and the aspect is that how can they really help improve things for everyone? I'll first start with saying, how useful are they? Because we want to make something help, then you have to know how useful. So one aspect is that we think that it will be very useful for confirming diagnosis. Oftentimes people go to the hospital, and then you can see they go to with memory concerns or cognitive concerns. You see the doctor, they do all these assessments, and they think that, this individual might have Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. Now, what do they do in the end? Then, at the stance now, in many places, even in the United States, these biological tests that I talked about initially are not done because the facilities are not there, the specialty is not there, the resources are not there. So we need to make it easier for these to be detected. Now, we think that if you come with a blood test, they'll help. Because why? We think that, for example, with some of the tau markers, for individuals who have no amyloid in their brain and are cognitively unimpaired, so no impairment in their brain, the levels of those markers are low. So if you take their blood sample and you measure, the levels are low. Now, those who are at the high end of the spectrum, so those who have amyloid in their brain and have also shown dementia changes, so really the long end of the symptomatic change, the levels are high. And then all the other individuals who are actually transitioning are more within or progressing are within this zone. So it gives us an idea to say that if someone has this X or within this range, then their likelihood to have the disease is much higher compared to someone else who don't have. Again, it helps us to separate different forms of dementias, because some dementias, clinically, cognitive changes are very similar to that of Alzheimer's. So it's very difficult to differentiate between them by using some of the questionnaire-based tests that are issued. Now, if we use these tests, the levels in the individuals with dementias that are not due to Alzheimer's are very much similar to those who are cognitively unimpaired or cognitively normal. And as a way, it also helps us to differentiate. These are all good. It's more clinical based. But one thing I am, and I think that connects really well to what is being done here with AA-FAIM and in Madison in particular, is that screening. We don't want to go to the clinic to confirm if we can actually identify early, and that's what we want to do, population screening. I showed you this figure before, that the bilateral changes that happened before, if we can identify those, then that's when we can arrest it and prevent people from going down to develop the cognitive changes. We talk about clinical trials a lot, and then we say, oh, clinical trial populations, they are not reflective. We don't have a lot of people who are actually representative of the community that, that go through, that are consumers of these tests. So what should we do? We should include more people. But at present, there's really no paradigm. There's no like, this is the way to do it. And the way we want to do it is to be able to show the Madison model. I've been talking to Carey a lot that with what you have done here, what the committee members and what the actual members of the cohorts have done, you have built a model that shows that it can be done. And that model deserves to be shared, because how great would it be to say, this is the UW-Madison model that is being used in New York, it's being used in Texas, it's being used in all these other places, and then they're adapting it to suit their communities that they want to recruit from. This is what we want to do. And this will be because we talk about diversity in clinical trials, but we just say it. Everyone agrees we need to, but we don't know how to do it, and we don't also spend enough time to do it. And these are some of the aspects. But again, as scientists, we like to go back to some of the blueprints. We talk about all these blood tests. Okay, let's see some data. So this was the very first study that we did when we developed this phosphatide marker in blood. Now, what we did was to confirm it. So we looked at different populations of individuals, some from Sweden, some from also in Canada at that time. Of course, since then we have expanded it and looked at all people from all over the world. Now, but what we did was to say, this is the brain imaging. So these individuals had gone through brain imaging, all the PET scans that I talked to you about. These are imaging for amyloid in the brain. Now, the stronger the color, then the higher the amount of amyloid in that area. So these same individuals, they sent blood samples to us blindedly. So we didn't know who was A, who was B, who was C. And then we measured those samples and then returned the results so that the people who knew the results will be able to link it back. We love to do that because we don't want anything to be compromised. Because every data point here, and that's one thing I always say, every data point here is an actual human being who has a life, who has a family, who has a full experience that people love them, and they want that, could we do things that could make it better for them? So what we did was to say, with amyloid, there was also imaging for tau. We looked at the phosphatide marker. The colors show up the different levels where they are going to. So those who had Alzheimer's dementia had higher levels of this marker. Those who were showing no cognitive changes had lower levels, and those who had other dementias also had lower levels. So it means if we were putting a line through here, those who are at these high levels will be those who have higher risk for Alzheimer's disease or actually confirming. And this was one of the good ways that we could do that. This is great, but is it everywhere that we can actually have these tests compared with? Because if you can do imaging, you don't need blood, right? If we can do imaging, if we go to the ADRC and run imaging, why do we need blood tests? It's a luxury. Because if you look at across the world, these PET scans and the MRI instruments, they're available a lot within the US, within Australia, within Europe. I've said that even within these places, it's not everywhere that we have them. So that makes sense. But even if we assume that these three continents, everyone in North America, everyone in Australia, and then everyone in Europe has access. The global population, that is a small percentage. We talk about Alzheimer's, we talk about these things, we say, oh, it is a global disease. But is it really? Because we haven't looked at all these other places. There was one of the estimates, the global burden of disease, that one time I checked, and the data they're using for many places of the world where there is no data, what they use is to extrapolate from, let's say, the US. So if X number of people in the US have this disease, then if you say in Ghana, there's going to be this number of people. But that is not accurate data. What prevents us from really going forward to do that? And we think that blood test is going to do that because 80% of the world currently, we don't have proper data on them. Who has Alzheimer's, who doesn't have, or why do people have, why do people not have? Risk factors, this aspect we don't have. And that if we switch to blood tests, and we think blood is universal, then we could do this in a on a much broader scale. So we've talked about the clinical trial recruitment, for example. And scientists, when we say anything, we like to be able to demonstrate, right? So we did a measurement in one cohort. This is the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, which is a big multi-site American and Canadian study that also recruits from Madison here. Now, when we measured classically, the people were recruited for clinical trials based on PET scans. You have to do PET scans for amyloid. And then if we say, okay, we need, let's say, 1,000 people for a new drug coming up for people to be tested on, and then all these people should have amyloid in their brain. What it means is that, and we say the population is about 20% amyloid positive. It means we have to screen a minimum of 5,000 people to find that 1,000 who have amyloid in their brain. Now, if we want to also increase diversity, that diversity includes not just skin color, but people in all different jobs. And if we have these jobs and we say, oh, can you skip a full day of your job? We're not going to pay you, or we're going to pay you just $50, and then you won't even get permission from your boss to do that. No one is going to turn up. And they have to go through these PET scans, and these PET scans are expensive. So we said, assuming a single PET scan is $3,000, it costs more than that. But we said, okay, let's go with the modest cost of $3,000. It would cost us $15 million to screen 5,000 people. Now, aside from that, that is going to be really expensive because the pharma companies can fund it. Aside from that, it's going to be so difficult to screen, to really image 5,000 people. It's going to take a long time to do that, and we don't want that. So we tried an approach to say, if you take the blood test, the same 5,000 people, let's first screen them with blood. So we ran their blood test, and what we saw is about 40% had levels that were high enough to be called a positive level for the blood test. So that 40% out of the 5,000, I can imagine if we say we want to screen 5,000 people with blood tests, it's going to be really simple. Let's equate it to the COVID pandemic, right? During the pandemic, it was, imagine that during the pandemic, the only way to really check that someone had COVID was to go through a PET scan. That would have been a big trouble. It's practically similar to that, right? But now we say blood tests came up, or we had swabs. That made things go quicker. People join in the queue, someone sticks a needle, take your blood, and off you go. This is what we want this to be. So that, because I thought this is like, we position more like as a luxury disease. Why? Because now we're having drugs coming up. If we require people to be proven to have amyloid in their brain before the drug can be given to them, and this is what the FDA says, that it can only give to people who have proven amyloid in their brain. And that proving of the amyloid in their brain is based on imaging or based on CSF, that not many people can access it. That would never get to my village in Ghana. So all these things I'm doing, all these things I'm contributing to, it will not be meaningful, at least to me, to my family, and to everyone that I care about. And that we need to make a change. So here, if we use a blood test, we could screen, get to about 40% who had, so we enrich that population, those who had high levels for the blood test, and then we say that within that 2,000, go on to do the PET scan. And that reduces the cost, would reduce the time, and it makes it more attractive for people to come in. Aside from that, we're thinking that we'll get to a time and age where we would actually just be using the blood test, because we're continuing to validate against this imaging, and that we wouldn't have to always be comparing to imaging, that we could use the blood test by themselves. This is all nice, right? If we're looking for a new study, we say like, no, this is how great the blood tests are, so I'm sure I'll get all of you to sign up to be tested. But what are the challenges? What I like to do whenever I talk about anything is that this is the opportunity, this is what it can do, and I like to include the but. Because if we don't have it, you're not giving the full picture. We have to cherish fearless honesty. That is the full honesty. Give the full picture, then the people know what they're up for. Some of the challenges, of course, we've talked about, it is a full spectrum. People show, when they start showing the symptoms, they go through different stages. Now, there are ethical concerns about who should get a test. Should we focus on those who have biological changes in their brain, but they're doing all right? If we go to test them and say, well, it looks like you have these changes that show that you might have Alzheimer's, and we don't have the drug for you. Are we helping? What should we do? All right? And then how do we even disclose these results as well? So all these come down to what we call these appropriate use recommendations that are still being debated and then being crafted. There's a recent one that was published, but more continues to become available to say, these are the ways that should be recommended for clinicians to do this. And of course, to be able to do these aspects, it shouldn't just be people sitting in big boardrooms and making those decisions. Because the people who matter most when these diseases and everything comes to board, it's not those who make the decisions. It has to be the individuals who have seen value in volunteering their time, their resources, and risking their lives to be able to be part of these tests. We should come to you. We should ask from these committees, from these groups, why do you want to join these tests? And would you be interested if you were showing no clinical signs, and then we tested you for these blood tests, and then we said, okay, this is where you stand. Would you be interested in that? And what are some of the concerns? And those are aspects that we have to look at. Now, when we go in terms of we say a lot about discrimination. A lot of people, especially from black populations, have said they feel discriminated against when it comes to blood, in terms of Alzheimer and dementia care. Well, we don't know, well, there are multiple, we could talk all day about sources and kinds of discrimination, but let's look at how we can address this. Currently, as we say, there are a lot of the studies, they include a specific kind of people who have good quality of the work. We're mostly based on convenience sampling. So we say, we were running this study, we put a radio advert, TV advert, newspaper advert, could you want to come in? How many people read the newspaper? If I work a factory job, I don't have time to read the newspaper, I don't even to buy it, right? So we focus on a certain people from a certain walk of life, and then we neglect others from a different aspect of life. But then when we have drugs, or we have treatments, or we have diagnostics approved based on the tests we've done here, in the end, all the people will go to the clinic. Those who go to the clinic, whether it was tested on or it wasn't tested on, we're going to use these drugs or these treatments for all of us. And that is not right. We have to make it better. And sometimes people say, well, but you want to bring race to everything. Well, no. So let's look at this, and I like that we learn from other fields. So there was a recent study a few years back that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very big journal in the field of medicine. We see that and that is there, right? Sometimes you go to the hospital and they use that to measure your oxygen saturation. It's a quick and easy way to do that. Now, what they did was that they ran these large-scale studies, and what they found was that when you have people with darker skin pigmentation, this instrument was less accurate. So when they compared that against so for example, this is a quick way to do it, but when you go to the hospital, they can use the proper, more accurate instrument. Now, what they found was that you look at these colors here, the red is for black patients, and then the blue is for white patients. They did that over the years, and what they showed is that when the oxygen saturation they show in percentages is here, so all these individuals had the same level of oxygen saturation when you measure it with the actual proper instrument. But with a quick and easy way to do it, this aspect, it was always showing that lower levels for black people. I don't think the person who developed this instrument from the start meant any evil. They meant good. But this just shows that it's just an imperative. Let's really look at across walks of life. It shouldn't be difficult, and it shouldn't be like a big deal. But imagine that if someone's oxygen saturation, all these same people have this oxygen saturation that's good here, and then you're being told that yours is lower, the treatment that might be given to you would not be the same for other people. And that maybe you will go through treatments that you don't need. And we want to really take those ones off. Of course, the often things we hear is that it's really difficult to recruit black people into these studies. Well, yes, because you have not built that trust, that community, that connection with the people. We expect that people will just walk out to people or have these like newspapers and say, "What, come in?" No, communities really get built around these aspects, right? I was speaking with someone who said they were going to run a big nationwide study, and then they had recruited the most expensive public relations company to do this. That they will put radio adverts, TV adverts, they recruit all kinds of people, all the minority people, and then they will all join. I said, no, they won't. And they were like, why? I said, no, they won't. If you think putting things up on TV and radio would mean everyone will come, no. Communities, we have to take time to learn about communities and build connections, and that's how it works. And oftentimes we say we have it as an afterthought to include minority populations. To say, oh, yeah, we've looked at this, and then now let's include these other communities. That yet we have to really build, these. It's more like different parts of the puzzle coming together. The scientists have one part, but you can have all your science if you don't really be able to have these people joining, the actual true people who are directly affected. That means nothing, and that's what we have to do. And that the UW-Madison model is really important. So. An example that I wanted to demonstrate here, when we developed a new marker recently, a new blood test, we reached out to Carey and then the Black Leaders for Brain Health committee. And then what we wanted to do was to say, we want to validate the study across. Now, what we also wanted to do, that we wanted to do it different. We didn't want to really propagate the same issues over and over. So what we did was to say, we provided a study. What we wanted to do, like as a summary, the committee met, they walked through every aspect that we had, and then they provided a support letter to say they would support this study, they would support the AA-FAIM cohort being part. So they vetted us, and then they said we should go, and then we applied for federal funding, all right? Now, it looks like we're going to get that federal funding. And one thing that I'm really proud of is that we are not going to do it as has always been done. Do it in all white populations, and then later you say, well, let's find some colors to mix it up. Why don't we do it from the start? We need to change that, and that's what we're trying to do. Another study that we are also very interested in, as I said, with all the things we do, if we can't connect to everything that's happened throughout the world, it doesn't make sense. So we're doing a global, proposing a very big global study where we'll have people from all these lived continents. We'll even add more cohorts to it. So these are the names of the different cohorts that will come together. We want to look at the global aspect of these diseases, but also how can we is it feasible to use these blood tests on all these populations across the world? Because we need that blueprint to tell us yes or no, or what should we do more. And these communities who don't have CSF or PET, I'll run through this real quick. So we tried a study as an example in Pennsylvania. Now what they did is quite similar to RAP or AA-FAIM, that they had people who were living in a Rust Belt area where most of them had been around the steel industry towns, and the industries collapsed in the 1970s. So there's a lot of poverty in that area. They are more impoverished. But what they do is that they look at natural history. they only focus on those who are cognitively normal. So those who might show the biological changes but no clinical signs, and follow them. So over the years, over 6 years, then you have a few people starting to develop mild cognitive impairment, right, over time. And then a few people joining, going that way. So we looked at a bunch of people. What we found in a nutshell was that you could use some of these blood tests when you test on the populations, that it groups them naturally to these, this is like one group and another group. And we had not seen this before. We had only seen that for PET amyloid and CSF amyloid. With all the studies we had done, we hadn't seen it. So we were when they looked at the data, then showed, I was like, pause, go back. What is that? We haven't seen it before. Let's look at that. We looked at it in more detail, and what we could find is that was similar to what we had seen in CSF before, where the people who have this, in this red zone, were those who had MCI and would go on to develop dementia quite quickly. And that helped us, where we could also show that associations with memory, for those in that red zone here, they had stronger association with memory, memory changes, so memory deficit compared to those in the blue. So we think that in a way like this, we could use blood tests in populations where we have none of these markers, or we have no way to use CSF or PET, where we could use just a blood test to really track, to predict who is likely to develop these changes over time, and then to follow those individuals, but also to provide interventions when they exist. I'll jump through these quite quick. But can we also prioritize the blood tests for trials? So we think a lot about equity and aspects where we think we're going to have drugs, some new treatments that have already been available. The affordability is one big issue, but let's say everything was all good. Access might be an issue, so should we prioritize some people? And we have tried some of one of our new tests that looks like, for example, these were the individuals who had high levels of that marker, those in color. Now it looked like the colors would differ. So the same, we use one of the tests they are here. So those, some were high here compared to others here, but other tests were all together here. So we say for this test, what is it telling us different? Why is it that this test is, these two are grouping them together, but these two are separate? And we did that. What we found was that with this test, it tells us those at a high level here, over the next 8 years, these are the individuals whose cognition will deteriorate very, very rapidly. These ones would also deteriorate because they also come down, but look at the rate of fall here. It's really massive. We use a different test where it looks like it measures the other way. It's the same thing. Those who were up here show very, very massive up climbing, where those who were in green also climbed, but it was in a slower fashion. So that's one way that we can use. Can we also use that to inform of therapy responses? One is that it looks like we can. So this is one of the drugs that actually has been filed for FDA approval, that they've been asked to supply more data. So maybe there'll be an approval in the line soon. So the blue here, those who had the placebo, so those who did not have the drug. And then the yellow were those who had the drug. So see that over the time, those who had the drug had these blood levels of their blood tests changing. So if you have the drug and then you're actually reflecting to the change or responding to the treatment, then your levels of these blood tests start coming down, and similar to some other ones as well. But we also know of adverse effects, and this was one of the big headlines with the new drugs that were approved. How can we also look at some of these adverse effects? So we looked at one of the new tests that we have developed, and then what we know is that some of these adverse effects are more similar to like some mini strokes. So what we tested was that if you look at those with subcortical growth or cortical stroke, so depending on where the stroke affects, and the levels tend to be slightly higher in those whose stroke are affecting the cortical regions, so regions of your brain that are around in the cortex, and then the association of this test is more reflected in with the cortical diameter. So we use MRI and they measure how big, the size, the area of the brain in the cortex that is affected by the stroke is. Then the more, so it means that the larger the size of the area of your brain affected by the stroke, the more you get to reflect in these blood tests. I'll be wrapping up really soon. We have people with mixed pathologies. When we say so, like black people are one of the populations with a lot of pathologies that come together, especially within the US. So how useful could these be? We have checked, and this was one study from Rush University several years back. It showed like African Americans were likely to present with a mix of pathologies compared with people with Caucasian ancestry. Why, and could that be useful? For this reason, we looked at one of the new blood tests, and we said, okay, can we try for people who present with different combinations? And this is what we did. In a quick fashion, basically what we showed was that those who had Alzheimer's in red, so those are the ones in red. So, and these are people who had given blood tests, blood samples, and then they had died years later. So we could relate to what the blood they gave during life up to 8 years before they died to what happened at autopsy. And those in red are those with Alzheimer's. You can see that these are those, like when you say AD, so those Alzheimer's here, but the others have more Alzheimer's plus something else. You see that the levels are high irrespective of those, which are the combination that someone presented with, which is a good proof of concept that if the individual has Alzheimer's disease, then these tests will pick out the changes regardless. We talk about comorbidities that recently we said that people with strokes, with, for example, kidney disease can have these effects of Alzheimer's, associations that are independent of Alzheimer's. And because we see it in the sense of saying, when you take things in blood, for example, they present in a cocktail, right? Because we take blood tests, we measure what comes in the blood, but we think some of these protein changes come from the brain. Some also come from other sources that are not from the brain. So we have used that approach to be able to separate out, because we think like people with conditions like kidney disease, diabetes might affect. We've used these, we developed new tests that are able to delineate, to differentiate the sources of these tests. And because in a sense, like if you're measuring in blood, it's a combination of everything coming down into the blood. And we have done that. And then with these blood tests, we've developed based on one that's more like, based on that separates the sources. So from if the protein is from the brain, it more like, it goes like this over the bridge. If it's from other sources, then it kind of have to go through the water. And we have used these ones to work out these changes in a way. I'll walk through this and I'll talk about this, the last aspect, saying that if we've done all great, all this is nice. But as I said, we still can't get to my village in Ghana. Why? Because when we have to take blood tests, we take the blood and quickly we have to put it in the cold conditions. We have to centrifuge it quickly and then separate into different parts and then put it in the freezer. Well, electricity is not really that is the biggest asset of my village. So what can we do? So I got one of our students to do this, to say, can we try new approaches? What we have found is that when we use a different, because we know that when you have the blood, you leave it, and then things start changing. The levels go down. They degrade. But what we have found is that you can use a new blood tube that has chemicals that hold the proteins together so they don't get to be degraded. And it looks like this is for example, if you use a standard approach over the time, up to 24 hours, it goes down much more. This is just an example of one of the tests. And then here, you kind of can hold it quite well. We have validated this also across multiple conditions. And it looks like this might be a way that would work, not only for my village in Ghana, but if someone has to give a blood test, let's say at UW Madison, and then they live 2 hours away, maybe they could just go to their local clinic, they take the blood, they put in the post, the next day it gets here. Because within 24 hours, they don't have to go away from their job to come to the center for these tests to be done. And I feel this is one of the things I feel quite proud about, that we can make these changes in a way. So in conclusion, these blood tests are going to be very useful for all of us, but in the nutshell, we will not stop until we think that we have gotten to everyone who deserves and requires access to these tests. Thank you very much.
Let's give him another hand clap. Isn't he brilliant? He is very brilliant. And he's a very kind man, and he made that easily understood by all of us. So we can take a whole 3 questions. If you have a question that you really need answered, please stand and we'll get a mic to you. Anyone with a question? Going once? Okay. And Mohammed, can you come up and get the other mic for me?
This is a quickie question. You mentioned earlier that MCI is the tipping point. And that tipping point, can go in one particular direction, especially if you have a blood test that can confirm what it is that you think is going on. But from a layman's perspective, So you've talked about especially clinical kinds of things. But for the lay person that's trying to understand whether or not there's some classic signs and symptoms that they present with, how or what steps can they take in order to begin to look at whether or not they are eligible for this test, whether or not if the test confirms, that they do have MCI, what do they do? As I said, it's one thing to talk about clinical, but if we're trying to get people to get tested, then what do we do in terms of having that person begin to subjectively look at yesterday, today, compare, etc.?
Yes. So in the aspect of saying with the MCI being a tipping point, I know it's quite tricky because with the clinical aspects, like before in the preclinical stages, you cannot really tell people, because you don't also have people going to the clinic to be confirmed. And now with the drugs that are coming up, with all the population they tested on were those what they call early MCI, basically those who have a clinical manifestation, but in an early state. And that's why I talked about it in that sense. But we don't want people to get to MCI if you don't need. So in a preclinical stage, it looks like we could call all of us, in one way or the other, we could be in an asymptomatic stage because we don't know if we're going to get to that stage or not. In how to protect ourselves or what some of the things we could do to help so that we don't need drugs, that is one aspect. One, we join in these studies. If you join the studies, they will get to tell us what is our risk. But even before that, some of the lifestyle changes seem to improve. A lot of these lifestyle aspects that we say, like exercise, improved diet, and all, they are good. One thing that we are trying to do now is to say, we have seen a lot of data showing that they improve the cognition, but do they also improve the biology? So for example, we're doing one study where it was a trial across the US, and then they ruled out an exercise intervention. So they put people in different groups of exercise, different intensity of exercise, and also they have the placebo group. And we run in the blood test in a blinded way. When we finish, we return the results, and then they will check. So we get to find out if someone goes through a certain type of exercise, does it help improve the amount of amyloid in their brain? Does it reduce it? And then does it also reduce it based on what we see in the blood test? And that we can provide a better guided example to say, truly, we think these changes also happen at the biological level. But in a nutshell, everything that we think is good, improving our quality of lives, please let's continue to do those because they will be great in the long term.
Yes, I have a question about some research has shown that there is some indication that aluminum has something to do with the increase in Alzheimer's. We weren't able to use aluminum until like about 100 years ago when they discovered that they could use electricity to separate bauxite. But they think that there's more aluminum, that the aluminum in people's diets, like from pots and pans and things like that. Another thing is that when you it's showing up in some of the commercials, they talk about medication and even deodorant that is aluminum free. Can you say something about that?
Okay, thank you. So there are lots of studies also looking at how metals can contribute to Alzheimer risk, dementia risk, but also in a big way. Many of the studies we say association. We say, okay, when someone has these metals or levels of, they measure some of the levels of these metals, how do they correlate with individuals having Alzheimer's or any other condition? The studies show that there's associations, positive associations to the high levels of these toxicants, then the more people have Alzheimer's. As to whether they have a causative role, so the toxicants themselves are actually the ones causing this, we can't tell. The reason is that, as I showed, we get to have people with multiple pathologies. It looks like when people get to the stage where they might have Alzheimer's, a lot of the systems get affected. So then they are susceptible to all the different changes, being immune, being all these other aspects, and that we can't really tell if these have direct links. But again, we have to keep in a way to protect ourselves. There's a study we are going to try to do in that aspect. So there's a study we reached out to a group in Suriname where they have in an area where they are exposed to high levels of metal toxicants. So they're taking blood samples, they measure the level of these toxicants, and we are comparing, we're going to run blood tests to say, does it really increase, has an increased level, for example, risk with these biomarkers in the blood. There's even a subgroup where the people were pregnant, so women who were pregnant and then exposed to these toxicants, they want to see, does it also have these harmful effects on the pregnancy, on the baby, or on the baby. So more to do, but the less, or the ways that we can protect ourselves, if we know anything that has like metal combinations in, of course we don't want to take them. The standards always have to be better. Less ultra-processed foods, because that's one way that we can, one sure way that we can reduce our exposure to these toxicants.
Morgan, I have a question regarding, someone else talking?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I have a question. I had heard something about different medications can also contribute to Alzheimer's, but not exactly having Alzheimer's, but mirroring Alzheimer's. It was called Alzheimer's 2. So I just wanted to know, what do you know about, is that any truth to that, or what can you elaborate more on that? It's just different medications, and then the doctor would think that the person has dementia or Alzheimer's symptoms, but it's not really dementia or Alzheimer's. It's from the medication that they're taking, showing signs and symptoms of having that. So I just wanted to know, what could you say about that?
Yes, so there are a lot of trials in these aspects, people looking at like hypertension, diabetes, like different kind of conditions, that drugs, people who are going on these drugs. And then, because we know in some diseases, like some of the drugs can affect parts of, the mechanisms that can make one start showing signs that may, within a short period of time, mimic Alzheimer's. But that would want to walk away. One thing is that your doctor would definitely know if that is a risk and what you should do to stay away for that period of time. But to provide concrete evidence, we are also reaching out to look at trials for some of these drugs, and then to look at what people who are on the trials over the period of time, were there changes in their blood, the blood levels of these tests. Then that would provide us with a way to sound a warning. So if someone is on these drugs, don't look at them for Alzheimer's. Maybe let them go off for some time before you can do that.
Yes, excuse me. I would like to know if you could answer this question for me, please. Can you tell me which one comes first, dementia or Alzheimer's?
So Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. And then we also have multiple other forms of dementia, all right? So it's a cocktail where you say someone can have Alzheimer dementia, which means, as I saw that figure, the last end of the spectrum. But someone can also have, let's say, Lewy body dementia, which is a different form of dementia, but also, will go along. There are different forms of dementia. We can mention about a dozen. But Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. These other dementias also present in their own way. So when we say dementia, is a global term, an umbrella term. And under that umbrella, Alzheimer's is one big part. It's the most common form of dementia that we know about.
Thank you. I had spoke to a doctor at UW over at Mount Zion Church. They had some doctors over there, and I asked them the same question. And they told me, that's a good question. They could tell me which one came first. So that's why I asked, and thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there have been a lot of debate with regards to Alzheimer's, whether it's hereditary or not. So my question is Alzheimer's hereditary? If it is, what are we going to do with regards to the next generation? How are we going to educate them, especially the millennials and the Gen Zs? What should they be doing to prevent it? Because I know maybe our time is up, but what about them?
Your time is not up yet. So, is Alzheimer's hereditary? Yes and no. So there are hereditary forms of Alzheimer's. From what we know, it's roughly about 10% that are hereditary. So there are some mutations, so some changes, very tiny changes in some of the proteins, the amyloid, and not tau, but mostly amyloid and some other proteins that, well, for the people who have them and passed on, it's almost like a pretty good certainty they will likely develop Alzheimer's. But these ones also show up much earlier. So those that are called the early onset, about 40 years, like much earlier before you'd expect. Now, the bulk of Alzheimer's or the other forms of dementia are more what we call sporadic or idiopathic. We don't know the actual cause. And that also provides us with an opportunity to say, maybe there's a way to also be able to arrest whatever changes that might be occurring. Now, we've done a lot of focus on finding drugs and all aspects, but we need to, and that's one thing is good to also study minority populations, because it looks like there might be some populations who do not develop these diseases with the same level of, prevalence. And what do they have? What is special? Is it lifestyle? Is it some genetics? Is it anything biologically protecting them from developing these biological changes? And that's one thing that hopefully that will help us to understand.
So I'm Carey Gleason, and I lead the African Americans Fighting Alzheimer's in Midlife study, or AA-FAIM. So this room, how many of you are an AA-FAIM participant? Yeah? Okay, excellent. AA-FAIM. That means African Americans Fighting Alzheimer's in Midlife. Okay, all right. So, excellent. Thank you. I don't have a lot of time to give you an update, but I will point out that we recently put out our AA-FAIM report. How many of you got this in the mail? All right, good, okay. That means you're an AA-FAIM participant. So, yeah, okay. So if you did not get one, or if you misplaced yours and you want another copy, please go to Mr. James Bester's table and ask for him to mail one out to you. So the AA-FAIM, African Americans Fighting Alzheimer's in Midlife study, I'm going to skip over a lot of what I had in my slides today and just point out a couple of huge successes. We are just reaching the number where we have 446 African Americans enrolled in AA-FAIM. So like Tommy, I grew up, I was maybe a little stubborn and maybe a little dogged with things. They said, you can't be done. And guess what? We can do it. So, yeah. So, and we did this because of a couple of key things that were important. Let me point that out. So, right there. This is why we were successful. So maybe you guys recognize Dr. Carter. And do you remember when Mr. Ed Murray worked with our program until he went into retirement for probably the third or fourth time? Yeah, you can't keep a guy retired. Maybe his wife talked him into it finally. And then we have Mr. James Bester and Miss LaTanya Floyd. So this is why we succeeded. So. And of course, our newest member, Anique Dupati, is not on that screen, but she's already making huge contributions. Behind the scenes, too, are the team, Miss Tracy Smith, Tiara Smith, Carey Trajancic, I'm sorry, Hector Salazar. Oh my gosh, how could I forget Hector? So actually, let me put this up right here. This is the Brain Leaders for Brain Health, the Black Leaders for Brain Health. But here's some of the team members. It's 2 pages. Our team members. A big, big thank you to all of the people who are working to make this a success. And again, I can't give credit. You know that Dr. Karikari talks about the Wisconsin model? I wanted to call it the Dr. Fabu Carter model. I still want you to publish that paper so we can cite you. And all right, so I just want to say, this is probably the most important slide that I have, is just to say thank you. And I hope to see you again in June for the participant appreciation event. This one, is it at the Alliance Center? And last year we did this in person in June, and June 24th this year. So if you've not yet signed up or know about it, just stay tuned and watch for this. And I think we're accepting RSVPs starting very soon. Okay, let's get through this event first, right? All right, so I just say thank you again and say, I want to make one last point, that AA-FAIM participants, you all are contributing to the science. Your contribution is going to move the needle for treatments and cures. So that round of applause is for you, okay? Really, you should be doing this. Pat yourself on the back because your contribution is making a difference already. Dr. Karikari's study, being part of that, where he's going to look at this novel blood test, you are part of that story. So I'm so grateful that Dr. Karikari approached me and asked if AA-FAIM would like to be part of this, because it makes sure that whatever treatments, whatever cures are developed, it will work for people who are under-included. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
There are always a lot of people to thank, but some of you have been kind enough who were asked in advance. We have a tech person here, we have a videographer here for the first time, and some of you had agreed to go back and talk to the videographer and just give a few comments. So please do that after the event. We want you to know that the purple and green boxes on your table are chives for you to plant. So please take those with you. And that was our own Anique Dupatti's idea. Also, the purple roses are for the members of the previous Solomon Carter Fuller committees. And we've already talked to someone about taking a rose to Miss Charlie. So please do take one of those purple roses as a way to honor you for all of your hard work. And now we come to what some people find is the most interesting part. We're going to ask Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller to come on up. Anybody else's raffle we need entry before? And thank you, Mohammed. So when you all talk on the phone, most often, if it's not me, it is Mohammed. So this is Mohammed. Come on over, Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller, and mix it up, mix it up, mix them up. But before I get started, one more, fold that one down. Anybody else? We'll wait for you to bring it. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'll call them out. Okay, before we do that, we just want to acknowledge the people that gave these. So we'll start off with 2 hotels, 2 nights in a hotel here at the Madison Sheraton. So we'd like to thank the hotel for those. We also have up here gift baskets from Miss Christine Elholm, from Katrina Sparkman, and from our Oneida colleagues. We'd like to thank them for that. We as well have the 2 African American quilts. Mrs. Doris Adams, please stand. We want you to meet the quilter. Please meet the quilter. And she's standing. And she is with her daughter, is Cynthia, who is also a quilter. So this is a family of generational quilters. I have seen beautiful quilts from other members in their family, so we do thank them. We had a contribution from Mr. James Bester as well. So we want to thank everyone who contributed to the raffle and made it so special. And now the first thing that we're raffling are the 2 hotels. So grab those. What's wrong, Mohammed? You're giving me the funny look. It should be 2 envelopes for the hotel, okay? And when you raise your hand, he's going to bring it to you. And this first one, okay, doctor.
All right, here you go.
Miss Dr. Wilmot. Okay, take it out. Second hotel room. Please put your name immediately on that so that it won't get lost. Okay, shake them up again, please, in between each time. All right, and now pull the next one.
All right. Okay, that's right. Booker Hardin?
Dr. Booker Gardner. You see him, Mohammed? Just give that to Miss Pauline. Just go and put it in her hands. Okay, next. Next, we have a wonderful basket from Miss Christine Elholm, and it has beautiful items inside, seed packets, and that's the one with the, yes, the largest one. Nope. In front, yes. Okay, let's pull for that one.
Gina Harris?
Miss Gina Harris. Lift your head and yep, and we'll make sure we bring it. Gina Harris. You have to be present to win. All right. And then the next basket is from our colleagues in the Oneida Nation. So we're very fortunate. We not only have an African American group that participates, but we're unique because we have a Native American. And our partners are the Oneida Nation. So this is from the Oneida Nation. And please pull Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller. Ah, it's our trumpeter. Come on up, Mr. Hammond. Woo! And then the next basket is from Abba Soaps. It has homemade soaps, and these soaps went out into care boxes. So if you recently got a care box, this is the same company. And pull, Mr. Solomon Carter Fuller.
Isabel Yamu? Yamu?
Sister Isabel, come on down. Congratulations. That's so lovely. Okay. Do we have the credit cards next? The first one. This one is, I hope you moviegoers really appreciate this one. This is $50 to AMC. You have the right one, Mohammed? All right. Yeah, it'll take care of your movie and your popcorn and a soda too. Almost. Miss Diane McMurray must be present to win. Sorry. Moving on. Pull another one, Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller.
Eileen Fareed?
Eileen. Our next one is a $50 Visa card. Buy what you want. All right.
Who we got here? Caroline Greenwald?
Hardine Greenwald. Congratulations. All right, now we're to our last two entries. First of all, we're going to have Mohammed take the brown one and lift it up and open it up so you can see what a beautiful quilt the next person is about to get. Yes, it is. It's very beautiful. Mrs. Doris Adams original.
Joan Brooks?
Miss Joan Brooks. Is Miss Brooks here? All right. Put it to the side and pull another. Tell Miss Brooks what she missed.
Wanda Smith?
Miss Wanda Smith. Oh, yeah. Right over here. Oh. I'm sorry. A photo, Miss Wanda. All right. I know that's going to be appreciated. That's please do not threaten Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller. Now, as you can see, this is a full-length quilt. I really love the beautiful colors. I'm so sorry, but if it's any consolation, at the appreciation event in June, we will be auctioning an Oneida quilt, an Oneida Star quilt. Ooh, and it is beautiful. All right, here we go. Take your time, last pull, be okay. Hello.
William R. I can't. Is that a B?
Willie R.
Is that a...
That's Mary R. You got it bad.
No, ain't Mary.
Willie R. Bolin.
No.
Okay, they're not here. Keep it moving. I thought it was you, so I did it.
Wait. Oh, that's you?
Okay. What's your name? That's her, Miss Willie Boatman. Let's put all those back. We also have in your packet, if you would care to fill it out, we're always willing to improve. And so on behalf of all the Southerners in the room, I'd like to apologize for the grits. That we're not grits. Well, Reverend Dr. G said I need to apologize for the whole USA. But what makes it so interesting, I asked, do you know how to make grits? And they said they did and charged me extra. So no, those were a little too thick and the texture was off for grits. But I just want one more housekeeping. We will be taking some photo ops. We want to thank Hetty Rudd. She's so good, so kind, who has been walking around taking photos. So our presenter is here. If you would like a photo, we know he'll be gracious and kind and give one. Also, people who arrived via Madison cabs, thank you so much. If I organize the cab, they'll be here at 1:30. You can take the elevator down and sit in the front, and we'll make sure you get home. You're free to take more refreshments if you would like, to talk to your neighbor. But thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for all you do for us. Thank you for all you do for research. Thank you so much.
This was a wonderful event. I think that it was very inclusive. I feel like that we saw younger people represented, we saw people's families represented, and having an opportunity to interact with people in person versus the COVID time where we were shut down, it just felt wonderful.
It was beautiful. It was a really beautiful event that came together in the way that the organizers envisioned it. So it was clearly one where people felt welcomed and felt included and celebrated.
It was well attended. I think everyone was very informative, and I got a lot out of it. The information I received, I can pass it on to my family.
I think that everyone was energized. If they're a part of the study already, they will be, not be fatigued by doing it again. And I think we got some converts, some more people here to participate.
My favorite part was when the keynote speaker was telling us the progress of Alzheimer's and the impact that people of color has had in the program. And I'm really happy that I've been in the program like the last 7 years. And so it's nice to find out what everything you volunteered to do is coming together.
Hearing from Dr. Karikari and how his viewpoint is clearly, this is a new way of thinking about things. He's thinking about inclusion from the beginning instead of waiting until after the science is done and thinking about including people who are traditionally under-included. So that was one of my favorite features of today's talk.
I enjoyed the statistics and the correlation of various parts of the world and their participation in the study and their lack of participation because of the lack of facilities to do tests and take tests.
Listening to the speaker was wonderful. I felt like he explained things in layman's terms. He was so inspiring, and I feel like the things that we're doing in our program are really helping him to do his job. Mother Mary Henderson is a member of my church, and I loved her singing, and I love hearing the beautiful accompaniments. And having Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller in the flesh, so to speak, was such a highlight. It was so fun.
I have actually seen many people that I knew suffering from types of dementia. And so I really thought if I came today, I might learn something, which I did.
Since I've been in the program this long and I participated in pretty much every activity they've had, even in the research part, I didn't want to miss out on the information that was given out. I didn't want to miss out in fellowshipping with the other participants and learning what has happened so far.
Every time I can come to the event to support Dr. Fabu Carter and all of her team and the project, I come. It's just been a wonderful experience for me. Now, I actually had my neuropsych testing done last Thursday. It is not pleasant to sit there for those tests. But when you come here to something like that, then any discomfort I have or any anxiety I have about testing, if I'm doing this and my part can help, then it's all worth it.
I just want to thank people for being part of such a meaningful project and meaningful event, and hope they go out and celebrate their contributions.